Talk 365 TV's Talking Wellness is brought to you by Brain Rehab Clinic.
And good morning.
We're back.
As well we should be. Let's talk a little bit about a victim mindset and how you can reprogram your mind. There are horrible things that happen to people all the time. And some people are able to overcome those things and get back to an amazing quality of life. Some aren't. What's the key?
The key is mindset. You nailed it right in the beginning, and programming and the way you think and the way you use your mind. I mean, we learned this so much from Dennis Parker's positive mind management and hypnotherapy, the way you can control your mind. And Brain Rehab Clinic, who works on the physical part of your brain to rehab your brain from concussions and all of that, that is one part of it. But then there is the emotional aspect that also still plays in even after you've had the healing of the actual brain and you've reconnected and have all the firing and wiring working right. If you have a pattern of negative thinking, you're really never going to get better no matter how better you are, because that pattern is the toxic syndrome that will actually take you down every time and actually make you sick. There are so many studies out there that prove the power of thinking can make you sick or make you well, make you happy, make you sad. And this is one of those situations that a victim mindset can creep in kind of gradually. And if you don't have a strategy on how to recognize the signs and beat it, you can really get taken advantage of by it and have your life derailed. And it's really unfortunate to see when you have all these good things that are available to you, have something that you can control not be implemented. So the team at Brain Rehab has been collaborating with life coaches, and Sherry Cowen is one of them, and she is absolutely amazing. She goes through a mini coaching of everything she approaches for how to beat a victim mindset, and it's in editing it, I literally had like a life shift, so you're going to really enjoy it. Check it out.
Talk 365 TV's Talking Wellness is brought to you by Brain Rehab Clinic.
There's something very different about being a victim versus having a victim mentality or playing the role of a victim. Once we realize those two columns are different, it will empower us in our lives. Hi, I'm Sherry Cowen, a life coach here at the Brain Rehab Clinic. And in this video, we want to discuss how we are all experiencing life, right? And we're all trying to learn and grow and progress. We're trying to feel joy with our hiccups and bumps in the road, but we're trying to overcome them. We're also trying to connect deeply with others and find meaning and purpose. But in our experience, there is one thing that often thwarts those efforts to move forward, and it's the idea of being a victim, okay? Now, being a victim is actually something we all go through. Right here on the board, I've listed a few things that inevitably happen in our life. These are circumstances that are painful, that are hard, and they inevitably come. For example, some of us feel like we might be a victim of mental health. That hits some of us. Illness, injury, never being married. Maybe we were deeply offended or hurt in a certain case. Feeling left out, there's rumors, there's addiction, there's death. All kinds of things happen to us in this life. So really, in essence, the truth is we kind of are all victims to a degree. But what we want to point out here is that there's something very different about being a victim versus having a victim mentality or playing the role of a victim. So let's look at these differences, because once we realize those two columns are different, it will empower us in our lives. Okay, so the victim mentality or the role of a victim is when we actually, our natural response and our tendency is to blame, to find fault. We feel bitterness, we feel self-pity, kind of like a woe is me kind of an attitude. We might have a tendency to rebel, cover something up, complain, escape. Now, all of these things here, I think, are kind of a natural part of life. It's actually our natural response when something hard happens. But the trick is not to dwell there too long. So things might happen and it's natural to just kind of blame for a minute, vent, complain, want to escape. Those things are normal. But what you want to start looking at in your life is, do you dwell there very long? Because when we dwell there, we don't feel love and we can't heal. So I want you to kind of pause for a minute and look at your life and think about, are there times when I go to this space of the victim mentality or playing the role of a victim? And if you do, you want to stop and look at it. Is it frequent? Is it often? Have you set up your home there? Do you feel like you've set up shop in this mentality? Some people naturally go there, others don't. And that's why the awareness is so important. We have to take a look at, is that our tendency? Because when we dwell here in the victim mentality, we cannot feel happiness and joy, and it's hard to progress and heal. So that's why we want to really clear up these differences. I recently saw a documentary on KSL TV, and it highlighted Shawn Bradley. Now, some of you might not know who that is. Shawn Bradley was a famous basketball player decades ago at BYU. He later went and played professionally. And while he was there, he had a successful career. Then years later, his life had moved on, and he was out for a bike ride in recent years. And on that bike ride, as he was on his way home, even approaching his neighborhood, accidentally a car hit him. Now, when that car hit him, he flew from his bike, and his life changed dramatically in that moment. He was then left paralyzed. And in this documentary, you hear them talk about, he and his wife, they talk about how hard those first few months, because really the tendency is to blame, find fault, complain, rebel. Like, you have all those feelings of that self-pity, like, my life just changed dramatically, and who can I blame for this? So it's a natural process to go through. But what I loved in that documentary, at one point his wife said to him, hold on, this is not who we are. We are not a blaming people. We are not the kind of people to find fault. We're not the kind of people to live angry and live bitter. And she said, let's make this deliberate, intentional decision to not dwell here. And I loved that, because I think once we're aware and once we recognize that some of these tendencies are creeping into our lives, it takes that awareness, and then it just takes that deliberate, intentional decision to take a look at it and say, okay, I don't want to live in this space. I desire something better. And the minute you do that, your progress can continue. Your healing can continue. Our brain exercises that we do will work better. Everything will start to work better as we shift from that one mindset into a healthier mindset. Now, we sometimes have to call each other out on this a little bit, because have you ever noticed, like, sometimes we almost want to dwell there? Why do we like living in this victim mentality? What is it about it? So one of my favorite speeches ever given was given by a man named Lynn G. Robbins, and he gave a speech titled How We Can All Be 100% Accountable. Now, in that speech, he addresses this question, the question of why do we turn to the victim mentality, and in his speech, he calls this list the anti-responsibility list. Now, his list has a few more things on it, but they're very similar. So he answers this question, then why do we go to those things? Here's his answer. We turn to that list as a defense mechanism to avoid shame and embarrassment, stress and anxiety, and the pain of negative consequences. Rather than repent or change to eliminate guilt, we sedate it with excuses. It gives us a false sense of security that our environment or someone else is to blame, and therefore we have no need to change or repent. He says it halts progress dead in its tracks. So when we hear that, can you hear the answer? Why then would we ever choose to stay in this space? It shifts the responsibility onto someone else. And we don't feel like we have a part to play in it. But as we hear, this is actually just a defense mechanism of our own, because we don't want to face the pain that came from it. But the minute we desire to look at it wholeheartedly and take some responsibility for the place we're in mentally, or the place we find ourselves in, that's when the floodgates can open. That's when our progress can continue. And that is when the real healing can begin. what happens is it takes us from this list, which is really where our heart is in a state of conflict, and it allows us to move to a state where our heart is at peace. Now, what's interesting about this is that nothing changed. Our circumstances don't change. They're still the same circumstances we're up against. But simply desiring and being aware of this negative place we can find ourselves in helps us make that shift. And there are people who can help us. Sometimes we don't see it, but there are people like life coaches, like the Brain Rehab Clinic, who can help point some of these things out, and then you'll be able to see it from a different lens and perspective, and then can keep moving forward wholeheartedly. And that is our goal. Thank you so much for joining us for this video. If any of this content resonates with you, I'd love to set up a 10 to 15 minute consult with you to answer any of your questions and help get you back on that journey moving forward. So jump on my page at the Brain Rehab Clinic, click on my calendar, and you can set up that 15-minute consult, whether on the phone or via Zoom.